Welcome to Everything EOS. I'm Zach Gall, an ICO data analyst at ICO Alert, the trusted ICO discovery platform. Visit ICOalert.com, the most complete calendar of all active and upcoming ICOs, to discover the latest projects and opportunities like EOS IO. And I'm here today with the founder of ICO Alert and CEO of block producer Cypherglass, Rob Finch.
Thank you all so much for joining us for yet another episode of Everything EOS. We're here every week, and we sincerely appreciate all the feedback and comments that we continue to get about the show. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know by liking, subscribing, or following the podcast on YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or wherever you may be listening.
On today's podcast, we will be detailing the latest news and announcements around EOS IO, including Hackathon news, some upcoming airdrops, current market sentiment, and Dan's proposal for EOS resource renting and rent distribution, and more.
Before we get started, I do need to mention that this is not a sponsored podcast. Zach Gall and I are just two excited members of the EOS community who, as a matter of disclosure, do hold EOS tokens ourselves. In addition, please do not take this podcast as legal, professional, financial, tax, or any other kind of advice. We're just two people talking about EOS, and you should always do your own research before making any decisions.
All right, so this has been a big week for EOS and the crypto market as a whole. I'm sure everyone's been checking their blockfolio and been really excited this week.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's the big elephant in the room. Some people, I've gotten a lot of calls this week. What's going on with EOS?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's the whole market. So this all started with the Bitcoin ETF delay, I think. Yep. And I don't know if that's the only cause, but that was kind of what started the downfall here. First Bitcoin and alts at the same time.
People who don't know, an ETF is an exchange-traded fund. It's basically a fund that holds assets, usually stocks, commodities, or bonds, but in this case would be holding Bitcoin, waiting on it to get approved by the United States SEC, so that people can, add Bitcoin to their retirement portfolios, their 401k, stuff like that. So there was an ETF that was declined a couple months ago, an ETF declined a year ago. Now this ETF decision has just been delayed. So we'll know in September whether or not it gets approved.
And the funny thing to me about the ETF, and I know this is kind of not exactly EOS news, but it does affect EOS. Yeah. Was the fact that it got delayed was not unexpected.
No.
A lot of people were predicting that it was going to get delayed multiple times and we wouldn't even have like a decision until early next year.
Right.
So the market sentiment, it changes on a dime. It's crazy. When Bitcoin went up 40% in like 2 weeks, not too long ago, everyone thought that was completely normal.
Yeah.
But then whenever it corrects down 20-30%, oh my God, everything's broken.
Yeah, it's all dead. The main thing I tell people, I get the same kind of calls from like friends and like my dad who butts me. It's like, oh, what's going on? Did something happen? Did EOS get hacked? Blah, blah, blah. But you just have to ask yourself, when things like this happen in the market, did the fundamentals change, or is this just a market cycle? Right now we're in a bear market. These things happen. The price is going to go down occasionally. Maybe it'll go up and we'll eventually break out of this market cycle. But as long as the fundamentals of EOS haven't actually changed, and I would argue, like I was talking with somebody in the EOS price chat Telegram, they were saying, they would argue that the fundamentals have actually improved for EOS over the last couple months, and I would agree as well. As we've seen the mainnet launch and seen these new proposals get put into place, seen the RAM market issues start to be addressed. So as long as the fundamentals are still there, I think you're still good.
I actually kind of enjoy the bear market a little bit because it's hilarious going through the EOS price channel and seeing everyone calling you out because of your bet.
I know.
Where's that $1,000 EOS guy now?
There are so many people that think I'm like offing myself or like depressed or something, but honestly, I'm fine. Like, this is a normal thing. I've been in crypto since 2013. I've seen crazy bear markets. I've seen crazy bull markets like we had last year. I'm fine. I appreciate the sentiment. I appreciate the kind words, whether they were sarcastic or not. Everybody checking in on me. I'm doing just fine. So thank you very much.
I mean, I still think, as bullish as I am on EOS, you're going to get destroyed on the bet. I just want to put that on the record.
We'll see.
I do think there's a possibility we hit a new all-time high. If we're making progress on the technology, we're going to talk about Dan's proposal for the renting model. I think great things are happening. Great tech is being built right now, not just on EOS, but everywhere. So many cool things are being built, being released. We're so much further along than we were at this point last year that there's a lot of good things ahead.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, we've also seen the recent announcement by the New York Stock Exchange / ICE that they're coming out with a platform called Backed. Backed, sort of like a backed security, but spelled BAKKT, Backed. It's going to be interesting. So
Guarantee that. I'd be happy.
what it will basically allow people to do for the first time is allow institutions not only a way to trade Bitcoin and sort of add Bitcoin to their portfolio alongside other stocks and bonds that they may own, but also a way to custody it. So that's been really the main thing keeping institutions from diving into crypto, is a secure custody solution that complies with their investor agreements. All these people can't hold their own stocks and bonds. They really have to go out and have somebody custody them for them. And it's the same thing with crypto. But obviously with crypto, with these digital assets, there's a much higher risk when you sort of trust somebody else to hold your assets for you. But Bakkt should solve a lot of those issues and hopefully bring a new influx of institutional capital into the space. So I think later this year, it's going to be a much different market as well.
Yeah, and that's another reason to be positive about this, because like I said before, the delay in the ETF decision on the CBOE ETF, it wasn't unexpected.
Yeah.
And actually the delay is good because it means they're doing due diligence. They'd have just outright denied it if it wasn't like being heavily like researched and really thoroughly thought out.
And I have a feeling that, so in addition to being able to buy and trade Bitcoin on this platform, you'll also be able to buy things like derivatives and ETFs and all that good stuff. So I have a feeling that they may delay the CBOE ETF again. This is just pure speculation, but until the Bakkt platform launches, and then have the first Bitcoin ETF on Bakkt. I think from a regulatory standpoint, the SEC would like that more. But who knows? We could also see it approved next month. It could go either way.
Yeah, and I think as soon as it does get approved, whether it be next month, 2 months from now, next year, once that happens, it's game on. We've talked about this on a few episodes, but all it takes to get back, or we didn't actually hit it, but to get over that hump of like the $1 trillion total market cap, it's going to only take a tiny fraction of a percent of pensions, 401ks getting into crypto. It could honestly be less than 1/10%, but the total money involved in these type of funds is just more than you could ever imagine. And
Trillions and trillions of dollars.
Yeah. And that's kind of what everyone's expecting, whether it's this year, next year, the year after. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of when.
Speaking of cool stuff coming out, we obviously just saw the recent hackathon. So for those of you that aren't familiar, Block 1 is putting on these global EOS.io hackathons where they bring a bunch of the brightest minds together. People, sort of form teams, and they do this hackathon over the course of, I believe, a day and a half or 2 days. The winner from each of those events gets $100,000 and then also gets to move on to the grand finals where they can win, I believe, something like $1 million or $1.5 million, which will be at the end of this year in December. But it was cool. I think we're starting to see a pattern. This is something that you mentioned to me before the podcast call, where at each one of these events, we've actually seen Block 1 make some kind of an announcement. And so far, our first announcement was that new tool, Demux, that they actually previewed at the first Hong Kong hackathon that, allows people to more easily interface and sort of query the databases in their applications. It's pretty cool if you're a developer from a developer standpoint. What we saw at the most recent hackathon in Sydney, Australia, was actually a dApp announcement. So a project called Haven, with 2 V's, Havven, announced that it will port to EOS and actually airdrop tokens on the EOS platform to the EOS mainnet. So what Haven basically is it's sort of a payment protocol in a way. It's almost like a payment platform, but the big part of it is their stablecoin. So a lot of you are familiar with Tether, USDT. It's a stablecoin, basically a cryptocurrency that represents, the value of a US dollar. So 1 USDT equals 1 USD, a normal US dollar. And Haven is very similar with something called NUSD, N as in Nancy. But in addition to running on Ethereum, where they currently exist now, they're going to also launch on EOS and sort of have this cross-blockchain platform, which should be pretty interesting and enable some cool dApps to be built, things like, decentralized exchanges that want USD pairs, all that good kind of stuff.
Yeah, and they did promise an airdrop with that, and I'm kind of unclear on what that's going to mean, because if it's a stable coin, that means every one token's $1. So if they're going to airdrop it, it's like they're just throwing like money to everybody.
I saw something that I think they're airdropping their Haven tokens, not the NUSD. So like the NUSD is a stable coin, which is kind of the back end and powers their payment platform. But I think you also need the Haven token in some way to interact with it or do something. I'm not 100% clear on how it works, but I believe the Haven token will be dropping, not the actual stable coin. That'd be kind of crazy.
As far as announcements, so there was another big announcement at the hackathon. EOS VC unveiled a $1 million hack pitch launch seed funding initiative, And what that is it's a seed funding initiative where the program allows teams from the global hackathons to pitch their dApp ideas to EOS VC companies like SVK Crypto, who we had on the show a few weeks ago. And they're getting an opportunity to receive an additional $50,000 of investment to launch their ideas. So it's not just the winners of these hackathons, it's 5 teams from each hackathon. So I'm not sure if it's the top 5 teams, if they're selected by other criteria, but that's 4 hackathons that are planned so far.
Yeah.
So that's 20 different groups of developers who are getting an opportunity to get put in front of the EOS VC funds, which so far, how much they haven't even allocated the full $1 billion yet.
No, I think it's $725 million has been allocated, and the rest will come in the future.
So basically, there's at least $700 million of funds just waiting to be invested into the most groundbreaking application ideas, projects that traditionally, if they launched in 2017, may have tried to raise an ICO round. Now they're going the different route, which we're going to see more projects come out like this, where they're going to get initial seed funding from an EOS VC fund, maybe a VC fund outside of that. I know OK Blockchain Capital, who I think, aren't they owned by OKX?
Yeah, owned by OKX Exchange, and actually it's not even a Block 1 EOS VC partnership. They just have their own $100 million EOS fund to fund dApp. So
yeah, so there's all these private investment opportunities, and it's a huge opportunity for these 5 teams from each hackathon to be able to get in front of them. So think like Shark Tank.
Yeah, basically.
But dApp style. And how cool would that be if someone from one of these funds, if they want to invest in the production and actually turn it into like a web show or something?
Oh, definitely. Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, let's pitch that. If anyone's listening and wants to fund this.
Yeah. Well, who knows? I mean, maybe with the production that we've seen come out of the hackathons of like, you know, showing the award ceremony and then had like this 5-minute clip, they may actually already be filming these, and they may do something like that.
Makes sense. I mean, I watched the most of the hour-long hackathon award ceremony, where all of the teams got I think they got 5 or 6 minutes to pitch their ideas and their projects that they built over the weekend. I would really like to see the next version of this, which is going to be, you're going to have all these EOS VCs.
Yeah.
And they're going to be the sharks.
Well, yeah, it's a cool idea. I mean, if you think about it from a macro level too, sort of this global broad scale, you know, there's this $1 billion dApp fund that Block 1 has, but in order to allocate that, they have to find good projects. So what they did, they went out, they found all these VCs, but now they still have to find the right developers. So I think thinking about these hackathons is not just a way to bring exposure to EOS, but also to get all the best devs in one place to then fund their projects. It makes a lot more sense now with this $1 million fund or seed funding initiative as well, where bringing all the best projects here, they can all pitch to the VCs, and then the VCs can do a little less work in finding these devs.
So on top of that, you're bringing in the best minds into one room too, as far as the developer teams. Like, maybe this project's not a great idea worth funding and taking to the next level, but maybe on a talent level, your team is just so talented that maybe Block 1 will hire you to move to Blacksburg.
Oh, absolutely. So the next hackathon is actually coming up. It's in London on September 22nd and 23rd. We got a recent announcement from EOS themselves.
Big announcement.
Yeah, very big announcement. So far, neither Dan nor Brendan, Dan is the CTO, sort of the brains behind this. Brendan Bloomer is the CEO of Block 1. Neither of them have been at these hackathons yet. They announced a couple days ago that, hey, Dan Larimer is going to be there. First time he's making an appearance, CEO of Block 1, or CTO of Block 1. Then the following day, I think like 12 hours later, they also announced that Brendan Bloomer is going to be there as well. So if you think about these hackathons as having this history now of making announcements, you know, we had Demux, that first developer tool at Hong Kong. Now we had the Haven announcement just recently in Sydney. I think London's going to be something pretty big when both Dan and Brendan are there. What do you think this could be? What do you think they're going to announce?
I think Dan being there is the bigger, like more intriguing piece for me, because Brendan's been to different events. He might not have been at the first 2 hackathons, but he's been at the meetups, some of the bigger ones. He's been on live streams making big announcements.
Yep.
So Brendan being there, even though he's the CEO, big of a deal is Dan being there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I kind of was speculating Dan might be on probation or something, since he's never left the country for anything EOS related.
I think they locked him in his office and were like, you have to build this now. We have a deadline.
But they've done like videos of him. They've put like a pre-recorded message of Dan thanking the crowd and talking about different things
to like show he's still alive.
Yeah, but he's never actually been there, and the fact that he's going to be there as a judge, actually, him and Brendan are both going to be judges, and that's what they're being announced for, at least so far, is big. And I think the other piece to it is the mentorship aspect. So In the official press release that Block One put out about the hackathon results in Sydney, one of the team members was quoted saying that they thought the most valuable piece of it was the mentorship provided to them by the Block One team. So basically, the smartest guy in the room is going to be Dan Larimer, and he's going to be the one guiding these projects and giving them ideas on which way to take their idea.
Yeah. So I think we could see some cool sort of hackathon concepts and ideas come out of this because Dan and Brendan are there as these mentors. Not to say the last mentors haven't been good, because they've been great people like Larry Sanger, the co-founder of Wikipedia, who now runs Everpedia, Sam Kosmanian from the same team. But I think this is going to be awesome. And to speculate a little bit on what Block One might announce if they do make an announcement, I think it could be a lot of different things. I know you were talking earlier.
I think it's going to be their first dApp.
Yeah?
We know. Like, they've been hiring developers way before the mainnet started. And they were probably starting their application build for their dApp builds before the mainnet launched. Like, we can only assume. And everyone's wondering when the first big dApp's going to come out. And I think the first killer dApp's going to be built by Block One.
Yeah.
And I'll even go back to a soundbite. This is probably the third or fourth time we've played this on the show. But let's roll the soundbite of Dan talking at Virginia Tech about Block One's next step after the mainnet launch.
We build vertical applications. On top of that, we'll be building a social media platform on top of blockchain. You have to create a system that's so viral in its own right that people will adopt it without being forced to adopt it. You create a new system and you move to the new system. So you create a social media platform that everyone wants to be a part of, and it can govern itself so well that people want to use the social media governance for more things, and it just creeps into use naturally versus saying, hey, let's tear down the old and replace it with the new. You have to organically create something that can live within the current environment and make the older techniques redundant and eventually unnecessary.
So I think, and everyone's talking about when Steam 2.0, it's going to be much better and bigger than Steam, but I hope if it's not a release, I hope it's an announcement. Mm-hmm. And the other thing it could be is the roadmap.
I was just going to say, if the roadmap hasn't been announced by September 22nd, I think 100% chance it's the roadmap. They've been teasing it for a while, saying it's, quote, imminent. So I honestly think that will be before September 22nd. That's almost 2 months away still, or I guess 5 or 6 weeks. But I also think it could be something more on the developer side. Maybe it's a preview of sidechains. Maybe it's a preview of the multi-threading version of EOS. Maybe something like that they'll task them with. Like, hey, build a dApp that utilizes a sidechain, or hey, build a dApp that utilizes multi-threading in some way that needs the throughput of that many transactions. But I'm with you. I hope that the roadmap comes out before September, and then I hope that they announce some kind of a dApp, preferably their social media dApp.
But I don't know how they could release the roadmap without giving away the dApp announcement in the roadmap.
Right.
So I think it kind of has to come all at once, maybe.
Maybe, unless they say...
I want the roadmap sooner.
Yeah,
so
I'd prefer the roadmap this month, please, guys, if you're listening. I mean, they've been teasing the roadmap now for several weeks. Brendan Bloomer has, saying it's imminent. Generally, when they say imminent, it's released within 24 hours, but obviously it's been a couple weeks now. But it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens. I'm excited either way just to see the projects, but I like this pattern of them making some kind of announcement and not really categorizing it either. Maybe it'll be developer, maybe it'll be more funding, a new fund launching to allocate that other couple $100 million. We'll see, but it should be an exciting time, and I should be there in London as well. We're going to look at getting you there as well, Gall. But
we'll see about that.
Yeah, for sure, I will definitely be there in London, and so will our community manager at Cypherglass, Adriana. So if you guys are in London, September 22nd and 23rd, let me know. Let's meet up, chat at the hackathon. We can, sport our new EOS swag. Should be pretty cool.
I think while we're on speculation, given that this is a slow market week, slow news week, we both liked and retweeted the same tweet. I don't know where this user came from. I don't know who they are, but I love speculating on what the future brings. So there was a user on Twitter. Their handle is Maple Leaf Cap. It stands for Maple Leaf Capital. I didn't see a website on there, but they made some really bold predictions on what's going to happen in the next year with EOS IO. And I'll just walk through their speculation. I'll just read the first one. So their first prediction was that Block One will announce at least 3 ground-shaking dApp ideas, 2 of which target the existing for-profit platforms in the billions of USD equity market cap today, and others with an ecosystem that can't possibly exist today with without blockchain or EOS-enabled tech.
Yeah, and to clarify, these are all predictions that they say will happen or that they're predicting will happen by EOS's first birthday, so June 9th, 2019.
So as far as this one, like, yes, I think that they'll have at least 2 or 3 dApp ideas. I think we'll either see it on the roadmap,
Yep.
or we'll just see announcements, hopefully the first one in the next month. But I think that's very reasonable. Dan has stated as much as saying that that's Block One's next goal. They have 10% of the total token allocations and computational resources on the network. So it only makes sense for them to use those resources.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from the beginning, they basically said that Block One is going to be one of, if not the biggest dApp developers on EOS in general. So when they start building and launching these dApps on the mainnet, it's gonna get real crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally agree with that. I think the two that they may target in the existing for-profit platforms is basically them saying, hey, the social media one, targeting Facebook, Twitter, those people. Maybe we'll see a decentralized Uber or something else. Maybe it'll be just a blogging platform separate from the social media thing. We'll see. And then I like the third concept of it being something totally new that couldn't exist without EOS.
I think I always hear about the decentralized Uber. We've talked about it on the show before. I've seen ICO projects trying to be that decentralized Uber. I think that's going to be a very difficult use case to actually put into action just because of the regulational hurdles, how every city has its own regulations. Like, for example, New York City actually just put a freeze on new Uber and Lyft drivers because it's like kind of messing with their taxi medallions. So like New York has different regulations than Pittsburgh, for instance.
I think the only reason, though, that they were able to freeze that is because it's a centralized system. Like, they can go directly after Uber and say, hey, we're going to fine you. We're going to do this if you don't stop issuing new Uber and Lyft drivers, the credentials for them to go drive. But when you have it decentralized, I mean, how can they really stop it?
So you're saying, like, you could shut down Uber because you cut the head off the snake. You
Oh,
could
exactly.
slap them with all kinds of fines.
Yeah.
But if it's a decentralized, like a DAO running it,
Yeah, there's
who
no
do
way
you
to stop
punish?
it. I mean, are you going to go to people getting in cars on the street and say, hey, are you getting in a Duber? Or no, you're just going to assume it's just somebody getting into the car.
That's true.
I think it's going to be very, very hard to stop, and we're going to see more and more of that, whether it's a Duber or some new security token trading platform that just can't be stopped because the regulatory body doesn't have a central entity to go after.
Okay, so their second prediction is Block One attracts at least 2 follow-on rounds of investment from the following: SoftBank, KPCB, Sequoia, Social Capital, Tencent, Alibaba, Google, and/or Facebook.
That sounds reasonable to me. I mean, if you think about the recent investments into Block One directly, not necessarily into EOS, although I bet these guys all hold EOS tokens, with Peter Thiel, and we also saw Tomorrow BC, which is sort of associated with Eric Schmidt from Google. That was several months ago. But the recent announcement from Peter Thiel, Block One themselves and the EOS platform are really attracting a lot of the top investment minds in the world, and that's not going to go unnoticed. I think people at these major investment companies, Alibaba, Google, Facebook, Tencent, all these people have investment arms to make investments into new tech products. They're all tech companies. But when you think about that, I mean, they're seeing this announcement that Peter Thiel's investing in Block One. If they didn't already know about it before, now they do. Now they're looking into EOS. So I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that they're going to take on more strategic funding rounds, not just for the money, because they certainly don't need the money, but more for the minds and the connections that they get out of those investments.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be 2, might be 1, but we're going to see more big names, whether it's the company themselves, because technically Google definitely didn't invest in Block One, but the fact that Eric Schmidt's personal VC fund, and he sat on the board of Alphabet for as long as he has, it's not Google themselves, but it's the man that was behind Google for a very long time.
Right. It's still, I mean, he still has some of his capital invested into now that EOS VC partnership with Block One, that I think $50 or $100 million partnership.
All right, then the third thing they mentioned, and once again, this is all just speculation, 10 other VC partnerships are founded alongside the existing, with $5 billion of funding committed from various parties across the Silicon Valley and finance industry. That's pretty reasonable. I mean, we keep seeing more crypto VC funds popping up. I don't think this one's abnormal. This one could be probably said about a lot of other projects also.
There was a lot of speculation in the early days, after that initial $1 billion dApp fund from Block One came out, would be that they would actually also be their own biggest VC and launch another separate $1 billion dApp fund that's just their money that they're allocating. They kind of did it already with that $200 million EOS Global partnership, which is technically them. But we'll see. Maybe they'll put up more money. Maybe they'll get people like Google and Facebook and all these people to put up money.
Well, that's the thing about VCs. So we have a $1 billion dApp fund currently, and that's already in existence.
That's
hasn't really deployed a whole lot of capital yet. But the whole point of a VC is to make more money.
Yeah.
So you start with $1 billion, and if you're successful, you'll make at least $1 billion or potentially more money.
Yeah.
And it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing into this monster.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and
every project doesn't even have to succeed.
Absolutely. And Block One being the biggest beneficiary of all that, since they have their hands in all these different VC partnership pots, they're going to then have so much more money to reinvest in the ecosystem, to hire the best talent like they're already doing. So it's going to be pretty crazy.
The fourth speculation, we will see our Netscape moment with one or more dApp delivering an ecosystem beyond current imagination and create social and economic value far better than the existing shareholder-enabled ecosystem. The dApp attracts $1 billion USD in ecosystem market cap. So I don't know how accurate this one will be. I think we have one like major killer dApp. Going back to the soundbite we played of what Dan said of how to get mass adoption, I don't know if it's going to happen this year. I think the time frame on this prediction is a little too soon. I don't think we're going to have a Netscape moment in the next year.
I don't know. I mean, I think if you look, I think it's possible if you look at that first prediction of the 3 different dApps that Block One builds, because if 2 of those are targeting existing massive companies like Facebook, if they can pull off a decentralized social media platform that's easy to use, feels just like you're using a normal one, but has some kind of a token incentive where you get paid for watching ads, or you get a bunch of real money when your tweet gets retweeted a bunch and goes viral versus just a bunch of fake retweets, or I guess a retweet counter that doesn't actually give you anything. So I think it's possible, but if it happens, I think it will be one of Block One's dApps rather than something else that comes from a third party.
And as far as the 3 killer dApps or whatever the first prediction was, I still think Block One's working on some crazy identity solution.
Yeah.
Because Dan's hinted that he's working on a solution to solve decentralized identity without the need for government ID.
Yeah.
So it'd probably be some sort of biometric type identification.
I mean, it makes perfect sense with the mobile wallet. So they released the preview of their Mac wallet in basically alpha stage, meaning you shouldn't store any real tokens on it, only use it on a testnet. But basically using the Touch ID on your MacBook, if you have a newer MacBook Pro, to sort of secure the hardware wallet using the Secure Enclave chip in your Mac. Same thing exists in your iPhone. If you have an iPhone that's newer than 6 or 7 years old since Touch ID was implemented. So if you already have a wallet on your iPhone using the hardware wallet part of your iPhone, the Secure Enclave, that you unlock with your fingerprint or your face, that's your biometric ID right there. Only you have that fingerprint, only you have that face. So I think they may tie it in with their mobile wallet in some way. And if they do, I think it opens up an opportunity for a ton of other innovation on the existing parts of the EOS chain, like governance. So rather than voting for block producers being based on the amount of tokens you have, it could be based then on that biometric ID, since you can't go out and make a bunch of new fingerprints, unless you're stealing people's identities. You then have one vote, and it would become a much more democratized, fair voting system than the one that we have today that is unfortunately still a little controlled by whales.
And at that point, I think there will be different types of voting. So some type of decisions might be based on one token, one vote.
Right. Some
decisions might be based on one person, one vote.
Yeah.
And there could be different models, just like the recent referendum. Wasn't there a recent referendum? Was it passed where token holders kind of vote on constitutional amendments instead of the block producers?
So the constitutional referendum will happen soon, which will require token holders to vote. So it should be actually in the next month, I think, is when that referendum part should be ready. And one of the block producers is building this. I forget specifically who, but they're doing a good job, which will allow token holders to vote on the specific constitutional amendments. So if you like, constitutional amendments 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, you can vote on just those instead of just one bulk constitution. So it's a way for token holders directly to choose, the constitution that governs the system.
I actually think we'll have an episode. We talked about last week. We released 2 episodes. We had an interview with Lumios, and then we did our usual episode like this one. This week we're only going to do this one episode, but hopefully next weekend we'll have a double episode for you. And I have some guests lined up that will actually be able to talk in great detail about this, and it's going to be really interesting. They're working on a lot of governance issues. They're actually other block producers.
Yeah,
I won't give away names until we lock down a date. EOS Canada in New York.
Both good candidates.
Yeah, but I told them I want to talk about the worker proposal system and some of the governance issues going on. And I know Josh from EOS Canada, he mentioned the referendum was going to be passed soon.
Definitely.
So that's going to be really cool to talk about. And they're the experts on that. It's not me.
Yeah, moving on to point 5, it says, in addition to point 4, we see a grand total of 100 plus airdrops to EOS holders and 1,000 or more active teams working on various dApp projects globally. And then in addition to that, the first ecosystem or public blockchain of choice would now be EOS instead of Ethereum. This, I think, is totally reasonable. We already have more than a dozen airdrops now, I think a month and a half, almost 2 months after launch. So this is something I think is kind of a no-brainer and will definitely happen over the course of the next year.
The number 6.
I like this one.
I don't know if this is going to happen in the next year, but it says Vitalik Buterin joins Block One as an advisor to help scale blockchain further and will help on a few key dApp projects Block One is working on. Now, I would love for this to happen because I think that the mega powers need to unite at some point. I think
Vitalik,
Dan and Vitalik need to work together, but it's going to take... I think a mass failure on Ethereum for that to happen. I think Vitalik's pretty committed to the project. I think he feels a social responsibility to it because he knows if he steps away that it's
over.
Gonna crash.
Yeah. I mean, Vitalik, if you guys don't know, is the founder of Ethereum, much the same way that Dan is sort of the founder of EOS. So maybe they'll get together. I assume that this 0.6 comes from the tweets from Dan saying, would love to have Vitalik come work on our projects. Yeah, he's got a job for him. And then Vitalik even helped out working out some critical bugs in the EOS code like a week before it launched. So he was a tremendous help there.
I guess the prediction is that he comes on as an advisor. So
right.
he could actually work on both projects.
Right.
It wouldn't be unheard of.
I feel like that would be the writing on the wall at that point.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see. I would love for it to happen. So number 7, EOS becomes the trading pair of choice and a landing currency across exchanges given its advantage. It will be listed in all major exchanges, wallets with a fiat conduit, such as Coinbase. Now, I think this is obvious.
Yeah.
Bitfinex, they only added one airdrop token for trading. It's the IQ token, and its main trading pair is EOS.
Yeah.
And earlier last year is whenever the Ethereum trading pairs came out. As soon as Ethereum's market cap grew to a high enough price point that it had enough liquidity, there were ETH pairs for everything.
Yeah.
And especially because there's a lot of Ethereum tokens launched out of ICOs in the same way that there's going to be a lot of airdrop tokens launched out of EOS.
Well, and I think this makes a lot of sense if you do it in reverse also. The first being it will be listed in all major exchanges or wallets with a fiat conduit like Coinbase. So those fiat on-ramps from dollars into, crypto. And then EOS becomes the trading pair of choice. And I think the reason why is right now people are using Bitcoin and Ethereum as an on-ramp. So you go into Coinbase, you transfer 5 or 10 grand into your Coinbase account, you buy Ethereum, you transfer that Ethereum to an exchange to buy your altcoins. But the reason why people are choosing Ethereum over Bitcoin now is because it's simply faster. You can make that transfer from Coinbase to the other exchange in 10 minutes instead of an hour like you can on Bitcoin waiting for the confirmations. But on EOS, you can do that in a couple seconds and it can be confirmed already irreversible. So when that's the option of choice, I think people are going to use EOS as that on-ramp, transfer it over, buy altcoins. Maybe it's EOS tokens, maybe it's something else. But I tweeted out recently at Finchify on Twitter, if you want to follow me. I had to use Ethereum the other day for the first time since EOS really launched, and it was a horrible experience. Just to do a token swap from Ethereum over to EOS, trying to send that one transaction was a nightmare. I had to resend it twice, increase my gas limit, ended up paying like $5 or $6 in fees for my 3 failed transactions. Horrible user experience. And after using EOS and sending a transaction and seeing it confirm before I can even click on the link to view my transaction on the Block Explorer is a crazy difference of user experience that I can't go back to the old version. I can't go back to Ethereum.
I have so little interest in Ethereum anymore. I actually uninstalled MetaMask like a month or 2 ago because I don't know at what point I did a Chrome upgrade or whatever, but I clicked on the little MetaMask icon and my account wasn't even on there, and I didn't feel like finding my recovery seed to put it back on. So I was like, I don't even need this.
I think I have like, I don't know, $40 or $50 in shitcoins on one of my Ethereum accounts, and I was doing the math. In order for me to transfer these 4 different coins out, it's going to cost me like $10 in transaction fees. Plus, I'm going to have to wait for all these things to confirm, hope they confirm, get them to the exchange, withdraw it. It's just not worth it even to go in and get the eventually $20 out of that. Mm-hmm. That would take so long to do. So
the fact of the matter is, I think this is happening as far as the trading pairs.
If you look back at our episode last week, if you listened to that, where we were talking about the recent Circle and Poloniex announcement, and I posted an interesting video on the Cypherglass YouTube channel about this as well, called "What You Don't Know About the EOS Poloniex or Circle Listing," where they basically passed Circle, owned by Goldman Sachs in the U.S., they passed their U.S. regulatory framework, which basically means that EOS is now safe to trade, assuming it also passes Coinbase's framework, which is almost identical, would be safe to trade on Coinbase for a USD pair. So it makes sense, and I think all of the sort of groundwork is there for something like that to happen.
You want to do the next one?
Yeah, I'll do the next one. Point 8 relates to block producers like Cypherglass. It says major IDCs announce their candidacy as block producers and will win a few spots. We may only see 3 to 4 of the current block producers still in the top 21, and at least one of them will be Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, who've basically pulled their support for BPs. Political campaigns heat up, and Block 1 begins to place their votes. This, I think, makes sense. I mean, if you think of EOS as this massive global network, if people like Peter Thiel are investing, if then eventually Facebook, Google, Alibaba, Amazon, all these people are investing in Block 1, they're going to look at the infrastructure inside and go, oh, wait, we can do that better than these block producers with our existing infrastructure. We can turn it on right now and start making this money. It's a no-brainer for these companies to do that. And I also agree with the same sentiment that we may only see 3 to 4 of current BPs in the top 21. And I think it'll be the best people that engage with the community the most and are kind of those community BPs before these, global IDC block producers come in.
Yeah, and do you know much about the thing Microsoft launched recently? The blockchain as a service with Ethereum, where it's like a private Ethereum chain for enterprise?
It seems very similar to IBM's Hyperledger. In that you can sort of run your own private Ethereum chain. Say you're running, say you ship food for Walmart. I think Walmart was using Hyperledger for a while. You can kind of share that blockchain between, say, 4 or 5 different parties that are all involved in the shipment of that food to keep each other in check. So it's not something where you need everybody in the world to be a part of it, just kind of a shared blockchain. The interesting component was that they took out mining completely, and I believe have a different way of settling transactions on the chain. But again, just another shared solution, very similar to Hyperledger.
To me, it mostly looked like an amend-only data. Like, it's a distributed database with amend-only features. So you can't ever delete records. You can only amend the records.
Right.
But that's essentially what a distributed ledger is.
Yeah.
But obviously, there's no Ethereum involved, no tokenization of anything. But
right.
It's interesting to see the big tech players getting involved in blockchain. All right, so number 9, with the dApp proliferation, official wallet, and significantly reduced resource barrier of entry cost of operation, EOS crosses 10 billion transactions per year on Blocktivity and over 400 TPS. Mainstream media takes notice and finally realizes blockchain 3.0 is upon the world.
This, I think, makes sense. I mean, if you look at the last bear market we had was about 14 months. We're currently in month 9 of this bear market. Doesn't mean it's going to last the same amount of time. Could be shorter, could be much longer. But if you're like me and you think the next bull market is going to come in the next year, I think this makes a ton of sense, especially for mainstream media taking notice. Oh, look at EOS. It can process this many transactions. Last time we showed you Ethereum that does 15. EOS is now doing, 3,500. That's sort of the max it's hit so far. At that point, with multi-threading, maybe doing 350,000 or 3.5 million. But it makes complete sense that at some point it will have sustained 400 transactions per second because so many people will be using the chain. Right now, there's so much availability and so much network throughput compared to the amount of transactions that even though more transactions are taking place on EOS than every other blockchain combined, it's still not even getting anywhere close to that 3,500 transactions per second record that we've hit so far.
And then the last one is Block 1 ecosystem, which is the EOS token plus all dApps combined exceed Bitcoin by overall market cap. Now, I think that they mean all of the airdrop tokens combined probably on top of EOS.
They're basically saying the core EOS token itself plus any other token on EOS.
And probably, let's even say the forks too. If you combine everything, Bitcoin's going to be a monster this year. I don't know if this is possible. Bitcoin is still going to be king, especially with the ETFs coming up. That I don't know if this one's going to happen. Maybe eventually if we're being ultimately bullish, but I see Bitcoin remaining king for at least the next year.
I still think there's a lot of time. I'm going to take the contrarian approach to this and agree with them. I think there's a lot of time in between the listing on Bakkt in November to June, the first birthday, for us to hit that new bull market. Maybe it's initiated by Bakkt in November, maybe it's not. But then the media starts talking about blockchain 3.0. These things fall into place. All of those people that now have Bitcoin in their hedge funds through Bakkt are looking for the next big thing, looking to get in on it early before it gets listed on something like Bakkt. And I think that thing is going to be EOS. So I could totally see this happening. I made a similar prediction, I guess, during the bull market last year that in the next 3 years, EOS itself, just the token, would exceed Bitcoin by market cap. So this is kind of similar. But I think either way,
that prediction's a little bit different. If your $1,000 EOS bet actually came to fruition, that'd be $1 trillion market cap.
Oh, absolutely. $1 trillion EOS market cap, which I still think is going to happen, but I think the crypto market cap itself is going to be multi-trillion as well. I just think EOS is going to take up a huge, huge portion of that.
Well, we spent a lot of time on the the Maple Leaf Capital tweet there.
Yeah, if you guys are interested, follow them. It's Maple Leaf Cap on Twitter. They put out a ton of interesting threads, not just this one thread, but it's usually 10-part tweet threads about really interesting sort of aspects of the EOS ecosystem, whether it's predictions for the future or, analysis of existing proposals or new proposals to add to the chain. Great person to follow on Twitter, only about 100 followers, so a pretty niche account right now, but some really, really great content coming out of Maple Leaf Cap.
So I guess we should take some of the time we have left on the podcast to go over some of the airdrops that are coming out soon.
Yeah.
Boyd.com, they're doing an airdrop on the 15th of August.
Yeah, so that's boyd.com. Seems very similar to Golem on Ethereum, which is basically this decentralized global supercomputer. You can sort of, lease out your computer's computing power to the network, and then other people, say like researchers who need a ton of computing power to run some crazy, cancer cure algorithm, they'll go in, lease your computing power from you, and you'll get paid in the Boyd tokens. So the other airdrop that's coming up soon is something called AWOO, AWOO, which actually links to something called Wolf Social. They said that they were going to do their airdrop in July. Didn't really happen. Not sure if it's actually going to still happen. Chains.com, that exchange, released something 8 days ago saying they were going to support it. So maybe it's coming, maybe it's not. Seems like it's probably a shitcoin. Something that I probably won't be super excited about, but I am excited about Boyd.com just to have that Golem equivalent on EOS, and I think it's something that we're going to see more of in the future, where we had all of these projects, all these ICOs launch on Ethereum with these grand promises that just aren't possible to execute on Ethereum, and we're going to see, I think, before we see those main projects like the Augurs and the Golems move over to EOS, we're going to see competitors pop up on EOS natively that may take a lot of that market share away from the Ethereum versions.
I don't know about the second one you mentioned, but I'm on the Boyd website right now, and the one thing I'm seeing that stands out to me is the EOS snapshot date of June 1st.
Yeah.
I'm losing respect for them as I read through their website right now just because of that. EOS New York put out a snapshot tool a week or two ago.
Yep.
And at this point, there's no reason to be using the Genesis snapshot. It's totally disincentivizing token holders right now, because if I hold EOS today, but if I just found out about EOS last week or maybe even this week, and I wanted to buy some $5.50 EOS at this rock bottom price, I didn't have it at the Genesis, so I would be getting screwed right now from all of these airdrops.
Well, and right now, if you're a developer out there listening, maybe you know somebody at Boyd, maybe you're in their Telegram, and you want them to airdrop to an updated snapshot, send them a link to eossnapshots.io. It's a great tool by EOS New York. They take literally every single day, they take a snapshot of all the EOS balances. So if you bought more EOS yesterday, you would get more if somebody does an airdrop today versus the one on June 1st. So really every new project that's airdropping, especially this far out from June 1st, should be airdropping to a new updated snapshot to not only sort of incentivize people to jump into EOS, but also just to airdrop to more people who are more active in EOS versus the people who may have sold after the Genesis drop.
So getting back into this really low EOS price and crypto as a whole, but we just had lunch before we did this podcast, and you said some interesting things about the opportunity right now for dApp developers to get in at like ground level prices pretty much.
Well, if you think about, people generally perceive a low price, specifically something that they're holding, like, oh, EOS is down 20% yesterday. This is a negative thing. Sure, from a financial, investor's perspective, that's a negative thing in the very short term. But from a more macro perspective, from this perspective of EOS competing with all of these other platform chains, it can actually be a very, very positive thing. And here's why. From a funding perspective, as if you're a new platform, you have this new idea for a new blockchain that's going to be faster and better than EOS, you need to go out and raise funding like Block One did when they raised about $4 billion last year. Right now, in a bear market, it's not a market that's very conducive to funding. It's going to be much, much harder for a new platform to come out, raise even close to that amount of money that Block One did to then compete with EOS. But in addition to that, to your point with developers, having a lower token price means a lower RAM price, means lower barrier of entry for developers, for new people just experimenting with the platform. So bear markets are usually really great times for developers to go in and build without the distraction of price and without worrying about, how much their tokens are worth today versus yesterday. So right now, what we're seeing, even though you may not see it on the surface, are tons of developers going out, buying EOS tokens, playing with RAM, maybe doing a test airdrop here and there, which you can see on some block explorers, which are pretty interesting. But ultimately, that barrier to entry to actually build on EOS is much, much lower with a lower token price. So it's a great thing for the overall sort of maturation of the ecosystem, for the overall build out of the ecosystem, which will eventually have hundreds and hundreds of dApps running on this thing. So ultimately, from the macro perspective, even though it can be a little depressing at times to see EOS drop like this, along with the rest of the market, it can actually be a very, very good thing, not just from a developer perspective, but also from that, platform wars perspective, where EOS already raised this money. Now it's almost impossible for people to raise that money and compete. Has a much, much higher chance of being that leading dApp platform than something new coming along. So the last thing we're going to talk about on this week's episode of the podcast is more of a teaser for a future episode, but Dan put out a recent blog post that I think a lot of people read, a lot of people are confused by, called Proposal for EOS Resource Renting and Rent Distribution. And basically what this is a way for EOS token holders to lease out their EOS to dApp developers that want to utilize the CPU and the bandwidth associated with those tokens. But it does so in a pretty interesting way. It actually introduces 2 new tokens, one which is REX, one which is SEOS, sort of staked EOS. But rather than trying to dive in and sort of explain this really complex concept to you now, we're going to have Leo Ribeiro, who now works at Block One, used to work with us at Cypherglass. We're going to have him come on the episode in the next couple weeks once he gets settled into his new position there and really dive into this and explain what it is and what it means for you as an EOS token holder. So stay tuned for that in the next couple weeks. Leo Ribeiro, great guy, agreed to come on the podcast, and we'll probably be on, here and there explaining these new concepts as they get proposed.
And the main gist of what Dan's proposing is he wants for developers to have the ability to build on the EOS platform without taking on the risk of the volatility of the EOS token. So It kind of takes that away, and it also is going to incentivize not only for people to hold EOS tokens because they'll be able to rent them out, but it also encourages them to vote for block producers because there's a mandate to be able to rent out your tokens. You have to vote for at least 21 out of your 30. You have to use at least 21 of your 30 block producer votes before you're allowed to rent out these tokens.
Yeah, and this combined with what we talked about last week on the podcast where, all of these EOS fees like the RAM trading fees and things like this being sent to the EOS token holders, that's going to bring a huge amount of people voting that haven't already voted just because they'll have to vote for 21 block producers in order to collect some of those fees. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But again, we'll have Leo from Block One come on and really explain in detail what this means for you as a token holder so that we don't mess it up.
Next week, we'll hopefully have 2 episodes. I have some guests lined up. We're just trying to work out the schedule of timing for this. But hopefully next week we'll have 2 episodes like we've been promising you guys. We want to do more episodes. We're also considering different ways to implement video into this. We've had a lot of requests on YouTube. Typically when we record these podcasts, our original intent was we get most of our listens on iTunes actually and on SoundCloud. So it's mostly been an audio thing, but recently we've been getting a lot of views on YouTube and having a lot of requests of wanting video. And right now we don't have the video capabilities because we're doing these on set in person. So you think of the typical web show or vlogs for EOS or any other crypto show, it's usually one person on like their laptop video, and then they have the green screen in the background. We're just trying to figure out a way that we could present you guys with a visual without it looking weird, I guess.
Yeah, and I think what we're really shooting for, we're looking at sort of expanding everything EOS into something much bigger than just this one show. Maybe that'll include a new studio where we have multiple camera angles, similar to Joe Rogan podcast. We can pull interesting articles and stats and CoinMarketCap and all this stuff up on a screen for you guys to see and maybe even watch along live someday. So we're working on a lot of exciting things for everything EOS in the background, so stay tuned for that. But for now, that wraps up this week's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in.
All right, once again, I'm Zach Gall.
I'm Rob Finch.
And this is Everything EOS.